Hey, what's up? Welcome to Positively Atheist, and I'm here to talk to you about atheism versus agnosticism and why they want you to say you're agnostic and why they don't want you to say you're an atheist. So, we're going to dive right into this episode real quick, and we're going to start off with some definitions because I want to show you why it is people have this distinction, why it is theists want you to say you're agnostic instead of an atheist, and help distinguish some of the differences in between all this. So let's start off real quick. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. I'm just going to throw a couple definitions out for you. Um, let's go to screen two. Yeah, I think this will cover it pretty well. All right, so if you look here on my screen, you're going to see when I look up the word theism, you're going to start to understand why there's a distinction here. The word theism says it's a belief in the existence of a god or gods. Now, it does go on to say here that it's especially a belief in one God as a creator or the universe intervene in it. But you're going to find that this is a kind of a poor add-on, and the reason why is because technically, uh, the reason why this is because technically speaking, uh, people who believe multiple gods are also theists, right? They believe in a god, they believe in some type of god, some type of deity, and this is kind of splitting hairs once, and there's a reason for that too, that theists want to propose, which I'll dive into in just a few moments. So, theism is the belief in existence of a god or gods. Now, when we look at the word atheism, many people want people to believe atheism means that you are a person who's saying there are no gods. They want you to believe that atheists are saying there absolutely are no gods. So if somebody comes up to them and says, "Hey, I'm an atheist," they want to say, what do you mean? You're saying there are no gods?" And even though that's not what the atheists necessarily are saying. Now, granted, there are atheists out there who will claim that there are no gods at all. Okay, that's I understand that. We'll get into that in a moment. I have personal perspectives on that, which is I don't believe that you can actually know this, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But I want to just point out the fact that when you talk to people, they're going to say, "Hey, look, you're not an atheist, you're agnostic," because they're going to say, "Do you know for sure that there's no gods?" And you're going to have to say, "Well, no, I don't. I don't really know for sure." And they're going to say, "Aha, so you're an agnostic, you're not an atheist, right?" And there's a reason why they do this. But hopefully, by sharing some of this information, I'll be able to help you see this, help see why this happens. So let me go back to the screen share and let's go back. Now, let's look to the next tab here. I had the word atheism pulled up. And now you will notice the definition says it means a disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. Now, I want you to think about something. Disbelief or lack of belief aren't necessarily exactly the same thing, are they? Because one entails that there is some type of positive assertion that the belief is false, the removal of belief, and the other says, "Hey, I lack the belief." So technically, under the phrase "lack of belief," technically speaking, by this definition, all babies are born atheists, right? Because babies are not born with any belief system. Babies, literally, when they're born out of the womb, they exist, but they have no capacity for belief, so they lack belief. Technically, animals are technically atheists, and you're going to understand why the phrase atheist is actually just a dumb phrase in general, um, and why hopefully one day we'll move into a world where we don't even have a phrase for this, because I mean, think about it. We don't have phrases for people who don't believe in Santa Claus. We don't have phrases for words for people who don't believe in the Easter Bunny or don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster. We don't have any words for these people. But for some reason, as a society, we've decided we need to have a word for people who don't believe in a God. And I'm going to use that to help illustrate, to explain why that this conundrum is happening, why people who believe in God want you to say you're an agnostic and not an atheist, and how we can sort through this. There's a lot of discussion even in the atheist community and agnostic community about what the terms actually mean. You have atheists who are prominent online who are saying, "No, I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic as well." And I want to explain how that's kind of like, that's foolishness. And this is not actually, when you actually break it down, this is actually not accurate. This is not an accurate phrase. Let's go back to the definitions again, because I want to show you a couple more. So the next word we have that we want to talk about is, of course, agnostic. Now, agnostic is one of those words, because it has this root word in the beginning. It's not a word in itself. It just like in the case of theism, atheism being the opposite of theism, agnostic is actually the opposite of another word, which is Gnostic. And what does Gnostic mean? Gnostic means relating to the knowledge, especially toward the esoteric mystical knowledge. But once again, let's not ignore this part, but let's look with the broader sense of the word, relating to knowledge. Now, I want you to notice the key distinction between Gnostic and theism. Theism deals with the belief, and Gnostic deals with the knowledge. So we're actually dealing with two different questions here, two different statements. One is dealing with belief in something, and the other is dealing with the knowledge of something. Don't believe me? Go look it up. Now, let's follow through with this. Because theism is dealing with the belief in something, atheism, being the opposite, is the lack of belief. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw this out there. Let's look at this. If not, so in this case, if Gnostic is dealing with the knowledge of something, what do you think agnostic is dealing with? It's dealing with the knowledge. A person who believes that nothing is known or can be known about the existence or nature of God. So here's what people are trying to do. The reason why we're having this problem is because religious belief is, particularly of all belief systems, is a very personal belief. Think about this. People have lost loved ones, they've lost relatives, they've lost friends to death. And one of the things that they find comfort through this process is their religious belief, the idea that they're going to see this person again on the other side, right? Let's be honest about this. It's a very comforting belief, especially if you lost somebody who's very close to you. The idea that you may never see them again is a very disheartening idea that you can come to. It's very discouraging. So religious belief is very personal. So, and I'll give you this example. Let's say I came to you and said, "Hey, I don't believe in the Easter Bunny." Is anybody going to get mad at me about this? Is anyone going to be angry? Is anybody going to say to me, no, I want you to, you don't believe in the Easter Bunny, so you're saying the Easter Bunny doesn't exist. I want you to prove to me the Easter Bunny doesn't exist. No, nobody does that, because it's not a personal conviction belief. But when we're talking about religious belief, what we're seeing is that this is a personal belief that people hear. And when you're talking with somebody and they believe in this God or these gods or whatever they happen to believe in, that's brought them so much peace and comfort in their life. When you simply say, "I don't believe," what does that say to them? It's very offensive. It comes across offensive. They get angry, they get upset, right? And so, because the very idea that someone could not believe in their particular version of God or that God exists makes them question their own view of reality, right? It makes them have to take a moment and reflect on their own belief and say, yeah, what evidence is there for this, right? But people's minds, they experience something called cognitive dissonance, where you have two conflicting beliefs that conflict in your mind, and honestly, it creates a literal physical pain in the body, a sensation of pain. And when we experience pain, what do? We either fight or flight, right? And so it creates this reaction, we're ready to get into an altercation, right? So this physical pain creates this reaction where the person, instead of self-reflecting and saying, "Okay, what reasons do I have to believe in this thing? Because here I'm confronted with somebody who doesn't. Instead of self-reflecting, what they want to do is they want to they want to turn it around on you to put the burden on you, right? Because they don't want to have to defend their position. They want to turn it around and say that I'm not being irrational. They want to say you're being irrational for not believing what I say is true, right? And this is what happens when people get confronted with realities that are not comporting to what they think is true, right? You have a person who believes this, they believe it sincerely, they've based their entire life on it, and here you are, a person coming to them not believing it. Obviously you're crazy, obviously you're irrational. So what they want to do is they want to flip the script on you, and they want to make it so that you look like the fool. And this is an intentional word game that people who are in religion want to play. So what's happened is this has created a misnomer in how we use these words, so much so that it's actually rendered some of these words completely useless, right, in conversation. Let me explain. You'll notice that the word, let me go back to I'm going to share the screen one more time with you. You'll notice the word agnostic has a couple of other usages as well, relating to it's anything beyond material phenomena, person who claims to have faith. There are other definitions about agnosticism that actually goes into a little more depth, but generally speaking, regarding the existence of things. But more modern wise, and if you look back at original uses of agnosticism, have revealed that you can actually be agnostic about anything. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So I can be agnostic, for instance, about the Easter Bunny. I can be agnostic about name anything, unicorns, anything like supernatural, extra like beyond the material world. I could be agnostic about anything. I'm going to give you a great example of something you can be agnostic about that's not religiously motivated. You've been to a fair or been to a school event where they have this little game called how many jelly beans are in the jar? So I'm going to share my screen real quick and give you an example of this. So let's look at, if you've ever been to one of these festivals, you'll run across these little games where they say, oh, hey, guess how many jelly beans are in this jar? And you'll win like, say, $100 or something like this, right? So you have people come up to this jar and they'll be like, I think you may come up with all sorts of different ideas. So let's say you come up to the jar and let's say Jason comes to the jar and he says, I think there are 350 jelly beans in the jar. Let's say Max comes up to the jar and says, I think there are 400 jelly beans in the jar. And let's say you come up to the jar and you say, I believe that there are 265 jelly beans. Now, I've actually known people who have actually won this game before. So they've actually correctly guessed it. I have a friend that one time guessed her was like 157, I think it was, and she actually won. She won like $100 for getting that right. But the reason why I'm giving you this example is because this is a great example of how you can be agnostic about things beyond religious things. So I'm going to ask you a question. Do any of these people actually know how many jelly beans are in the jar? The answer, of course, is no. No, they don't. Nobody knows how many jelly beans are in a jar unless you put them in there. So because of that, everybody in this group is technically agnostic regarding regarding the number of jelly beans that are in the jar, because no one is claiming to have knowledge. Okay, so you can be agnostic about anything, any subject. You can be agnostic if you have a belief or not, and you don't claim certain knowledge, you are technically agnostic. So so when I ask somebody, hey, are you if somebody says define themselves as, especially if we're having a conversation about spirituality, and they say, well, I'm agnostic. Here's the reason why atheists like me get frustrated with that, is because saying you're agnostic doesn't actually answer the question as to whether or not you believe in a God, right? All you're saying agnostic is, I'm agnostic, meaning I don't claim to have knowledge either way. That's fine. But notice this is the little thing that's stuck in there. When you're talking to a theist, or you're talking to somebody who's from that perspective, what they want to do is they want to shift the conversation from your belief to your knowledge claim, right? They want to differentiate the two, because if they can make it look like that you are being irrational, they can push you into a position that you're not actually saying you are. They want you to say, instead of saying, I don't believe, they want you to say, oh, there could be, there could not be, right? They want you to emphasize that, because that makes them feel better about their lack of evidence when it comes to the perspective on this, on the religious claims. So let me give you a good example of what I mean by this. Most people want atheism to look like, let me get most people want the conversation to look like this. They want the conversation to look like this. They want to be a couple of different places. They want to make atheism over here on this side to mean certain claim that God doesn't exist. And they want agnosticism to be over here. Or yes. And they want this to be uncertain, meaning uncertain. Okay. And they want themselves to be here in the middle, believer. Because what they want to do is they want to make it look like if you are over here, then you're irrational. So that way they can say, oh, atheism is irrational. Not believing in God is irrational because you have no justification. And then they want themselves to look like the best position, because they are people who, quote unquote, are striking the balance between science and belief. They also, and what they want over here is they want to be able to say, well, this person is not saying I'm wrong, right? They're saying I could be right. And if they say I could be right, then it makes their position like it's somewhat reasonable, even if, and this is the big thing, even if they have no facts to support them. Okay? So, yes, as a believer, I admit I have no facts to support myself, but hey, guess what? All the reasonable people say I could be right. So by shifting the burden of proof, they are able to say, well, there is no such thing as a reasonable atheist, because atheists are saying that there are no God, but that's not true. When you look at the definitions, let's look at them again. Theism is the belief. Atheism is the lack of belief. So we're dealing with belief. Gnostic is dealing with knowledge, related to especially claiming the knowledge of something, especially esoteric. Now, this is regarding religion specifically in that case. And then agnostic means that this person says nothing can be known or not known. This is once again dealing with knowledge. So how would this look on a graph If the other graph is wrong, how would this look on a graph that is more accurate? And I'm going to share with you a graph real quick that I thought was very enlightening. So let's look at this together. Here we are. Look at this. This is a better representation of what we need to be looking at. Here we have, and this is the truth, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry, I should say more politically correct. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the truth. All of us are some combination of the two. This isn't a sliding scale where you go from atheist, agnostic, and believer. No, we're all some combination of two of those attributes. Let me show you a graph to help explain this. So here you have a theist, agnostic theist. This is a person who believes in God, which makes them a theist, but they claim to know, which is what makes them a Gnostic. So this person is a Gnostic theist. Remember, we're doing two different claims. One claim about belief and one claim about knowledge. These are two different questions. The question is, there are two questions that you ask that are asked of all of us, which is, what do you believe to be true? And then what do you claim to know about those beliefs? Those are the two different questions. So they're two distinct questions. It's not one question. So you could be agnostic or Gnostic about any subject. I could be let's take the case of the flat earth or round earth, whatever you happen to believe. I could be a Gnostic flat earther. That's someone who believes that the earth is flat, but and claims to have knowledge of that belief is true. Or you could be an agnostic flat earther. So you could be a person who believes the earth is flat, but does not claim to have certain knowledge of that, doesn't have the claim to have any kind of evidence for it, right? That would make you an agnostic flat earther. And the same is true for the round earth. You could be an agnostic round earther. So this is a person who believes the earth is round, but doesn't claim any special knowledge about that claim. And the same is true with the round earth. You can be a Gnostic round earther. Once again, in similar fashion, this is a person who believes the earth is round, but claims to have certain knowledge that it's true. So if we look at all of that in perspective, I think this graph will really help you wrap your head around what the actual terms mean and how they should be used. So we look here on the bottom right-hand quadrant, we have agnostic theists. These are people who believe in God, but do not claim to know. Now, this is a lot of people, this category, and more so as time is going on and science is expounding, you're having a lot of people push into this quadrant where they believe in some type of, a lot of people who are like, they believe in some type of force, some type of energy, something like that, but they don't claim to have any special knowledge of this, right? You have people who are just kind of like spiritual people. They kind of believe like God is just this essence, and he kind of, they'll say terms like, I don't really have any evidence for this. I couldn't prove this to you. These are people who are agnostic theists. Okay. Then you have people in the top right-hand corner who are what we call Gnostic theists. These are people who not only believe in God, but they claim to know that there's a God. I was one of those people. I was a person who had not only had a belief in a God, but I also had what I thought was special knowledge that God existed. I could defend it with using Christian apologetics. I could show like what I thought was used. One time I thought a guy was levitating off the ground. We were praying for him. One time I used to speak in tongues. These are evidentiary claims that proved to me that God was that proved to me that my belief was correct, right? So I was a Gnostic theist. Now let's look at the other sections here. Just like I gave an example of the flat earth, we have the agnostic atheist in the bottom left-hand corner. These are people who they don't believe in God and They do not claim to know that for sure. Now, that's where I happen to be right now in my life. I don't believe in any gods. I don't believe any gods exist, right? But at the same time, I'm not saying, and this is an important distinction, I'm not saying that gods don't exist. I'm not saying I know for sure. I'm not saying I have evidence of it. And once again, this does not make me just an agnostic. I am an agnostic atheist. Okay. It's a combination of those two. And then we have, of course, in the other corner, we have these people who are Gnostic atheists. These are people who do not believe in God, and they also claim to know that there are no gods, right? These are what a lot of people refer to as hard atheism versus weak atheism, which is a term that's it's not accurate. We already have terms for these. We don't need to create all these additional terms. And once again, these are terms are all this is designed to push the burden of proof onto the atheist where it doesn't belong. And here's why I say that, because you cannot disprove a negative, especially when the negative you're trying to disprove is magical in essence. Because as soon as you interject magic or you interject miracles, then all arguments for reason and rationale go right out the window. Because guess what? And I'll give you an example and of what I mean by this. The reason why atheism carries with it no burden of proof is because it's always the person who makes the positive assertion that something is true that is required to provide the evidence for that. The atheist, it's not an atheist's job to prove that there are no gods. That's in my opinion, that's an impossible thing to do. And here, let me give you an example of why this is the case. Let's say like I had superpowers and I could be at all places at all times. I was omnipresent. Would that be and let's say I searched all of known reality, past, present, and future, at all in all corners of in all spaces at all in all places, and I was able to look simultaneously at everything with my own eyes, searching for quote unquote a God. Would that be enough to disprove that there is no God? And when I say that, I also mean all philosophies, all argumentations too. I'm not only omniscient, I'm omnipresent, but I'm also omniscient, knowing all details of all facts. Let's say I was able to examine all of that. Would that be enough to disprove a God? The answer is no, because by definition, God is supernatural or magical. So the rules of reasoning and rationale break down, right? He could make himself unknowable to everybody, or just make himself unknowable to me. So I would be able to, I would say, look, I've traveled everywhere. I've looked at all possible aspects of reality itself, both material and immaterial, meaning the actual information that's available. And I found no evidence of God. And you would just say, aha, he was somewhere and he just didn't want to make himself known to you. So this is why in the court of law, for instance, defendants are not required to prove their innocence, right? Because it's something that you cannot prove your innocence, right? Or at least it's very difficult to prove your innocence, near impossible. That's why in most fair and reasonable judicial systems, it is the prosecution's job to prove the guilt, right? It's their job to show with different levels of certainty that the person is guilty of the crime that they are being accused of. It's technically speaking, the defendant can just go into court and just sit down and not say anything, because it's not their job to prove their innocence. And in fact, if you look at how fair and reasonable court systems work, jurors don't declare the defendant innocent or guilty. That's not their options. They have two options, which is the defendant is either found guilty or they're found not guilty. It's because the burden of proof is on the person making the positive assertion or the claim. And this is why theists want to put atheists, they want to shift the burden of proof onto the atheists because it makes them feel better about their position. They recognize they don't have the evidence for it. They recognize they can't make a case for it. They recognize that it doesn't seem to make logical sense in reality. So instead of facing that fact and accepting that and just admitting, hey, look, I don't have any evidence for this. I know it sounds silly. I just believe it anyways. They want to shift the burden of proof and put it on the atheist and say, aha, if you can't prove God doesn't exist, then you're being irrational. Or you could take this out and just say you're agnostic, which says, oh, hey, it could be there, it could not be there, right? So this is why the burden of proof is getting shifted. So I gave a couple of examples of how the burden of proof works and why it's important for this. And the reason why this is so important is because these uses of words and this misusage of words is really distracting from the conversation. Atheists don't believe what you believe, not because they necessarily have evidence that you're wrong, that they could prove to you you're wrong. They just don't believe it because there's no evidence for these claims. And one of the problems is that there may never be any way to have evidence for these claims. A lot of times atheists will say, well, what would convince you? What evidence would work? And the only honest answer is to say, well, I really don't know, but if there were a God, he would know. He would know what it takes to convince me. And because he hasn't yet done that, there's only one or two possible options. Either A, he doesn't exist, or B, he doesn't want to convince me. In either case, it's not really my fault. But the theist hears that, and it's very intimidating because they want to be able to put the blame on you. They want to be able to put the burden of evidence on you and make you feel irrational for not believing their claims. When in reality, you're just saying, look, I don't believe you. I don't believe these claims, right? And this is a perfect irrational position to have. In fact, this is the default position for all beliefs. There are probably billions upon billions of things that other people believe that you don't believe right now. Many things, most of those you may never have heard of, and you may never hear of the rest of your life. You may die one day and never heard of 99.9% of the beliefs on this planet, right? But that makes you agnostic. It makes you a non-believer. You don't believe in it. You either believe a proposition is true or you don't. It's like an on and off switch. Now, when it comes to knowledge, you have like a scale of when it comes to knowledge, whether or not you're Gnostic or agnostic, it's like a floating scale because let's be honest here, what do we really know is real? I mean, as far as we can tell, everything around us could be fake. This could all be a simulation. So we really don't have the exact answers for all those things. So the truth is all knowledge is tentative anyways. We're all kind of just floating back and forth. And if you're being quite honest, all of us are really agnostic about everything, with the exception of a few axiomatic beliefs like the law of non-contradiction or these kind of axiomatic positions. So outside of that, let's be honest here, we're pretty much all agnostic. So this is why when someone says, hey, I'm agnostic when it comes, like if you ask them what they believe about God, they're agnostic. This is why this doesn't really answer the question. You really need to say whether you really need to come to the actual acceptance of the position, acceptance of what you actually believe. And so what I tell people is say, look, how do you know if you're agnostic or agnostic? Well, ask yourself, start off with whatever the proposition is being put to you. So whether it's how many jelly beans are in the jar, somebody tells you, hey, there's 157 jelly beans in the jar, or whether it's saying, hey, look, whatever it is. So let's take the jelly bean example. Somebody says, hey, there's 157 jelly beans in the jar. Say, okay, I don't believe that's true, but I'm not, here's the important part. I'm not saying it's false. I'm just saying I don't believe it's true. Right? So that would make you a disbeliever in the theory that the claim that 157 jelly beans in the jar. It doesn't mean you're saying they're wrong. It doesn't mean you're saying they're right. And it doesn't mean you're saying there's even a potential for them they're right or wrong. It's just saying, I don't believe at this point there are 157 beans jelly bar. And now, then we look at the knowledge claim. Now you come up with a level of, so whether you're Gnostic or agnostic about a certain number, let's be honest here, you're agnostic about how many jelly beans in a jar, because you really don't know. If it's a scale, it's not. And what I love about this graph here is it shows that it's not just like a straight, like you either um believe or you don't. You either you're agnostic or agnostic. This is a sliding scale. People, you kind of ebb and flow through this on depending on what the claim is you're being talked about. Like I said, the word atheist can be simply replaced with flat earther or round earther. You can be I'm gonna put this over here real quick. You can be this can be for any topic. You can be agnostic flat earther. Okay, and remember, based upon that, what does that mean? It means that you are a person. If you're agnostic flat earther, it means you believe the earth is flat, but you don't claim certain knowledge about that belief. Okay, or you can be a Gnostic round earther. And this is a person who believes the earth is round and claims to have certain knowledge. So you can see, based upon all this, that the word agnostic can be used for anything. It's not dealing just with religious statements. And that's why using this phrase agnostic to define your position on God is not a useful term. All this is talking about is your claim to certain knowledge. That's it. The question is still going to be, what is your belief? And this is such an important distinction to have. And if people will start rethinking how they're using these terms, it will really help the conversations we're trying to have, which is, hey, what do you believe and why do you believe it? And hopefully you found this video enlightening. Hopefully you found it helpful to explain the difference between agnosticism and Gnosticism and theism and atheism. Hopefully you found this chart helpful. If I'm going to link to this actual chart, so you'll have that, so you can see it, you can share it with your friends, and hopefully it will help you have the better conversations in the future moving forward. And for you atheists out there, stop trying to obfuscate this. A lot of people, for me, I had a hard, and here's the real reality is about this. Atheism comes with a lot of bad connotations. Let's just be frank about this. The word atheism has been run through the mud. I was taught my whole life growing up in church that atheists were bad people. They were can't be trusted. I just saw a study the other day that atheists are the least trusted people group on the planet, and even less trustworthy than jihadists by many people. Okay, so, but and for what? Because we don't believe that there's a God, right? This is the narrative that's been pushed to all of us to try to make atheism look silly and ridiculous, when in fact atheism is the default position and it's the only reasonable position. And I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it is. There is no evidence of gods or gods existing, right? There's no evidence of any of this, and there may never be any evidence of it. So atheism is the default, the most reasonable position. Now you can tell me, hey, look, I accept that there's no evidence of God, but I believe it just based on faith, right? Regardless. And that's fine if that's what you believe, but don't come to me then and say, well, you must believe it too, right? Because you haven't made the case that's reasonable to believe it yet. So this is the real problem. This is the real problem. Atheism is not a bad word. You don't have to be ashamed of it. You don't have to be embarrassed to be an atheist. All an atheist is someone who just doesn't believe. Babies are all atheists. Okay. Technically speaking, any organisms that have conscious thought that don't have any belief statement on God. Now I'm kind of interjecting kind of assumptions here. I'm assuming most other animals are atheists. Most other, no, they could be possible they have some type of belief in some type of supernatural being. We just don't understand how they relate that to, or how they think about it. But as far as we can tell, all other animals are atheists, right? As far as we can tell, all babies are atheists. Atheism is not a bad word. You're not a bad person if you're an atheist. You're just literally a person who doesn't believe in God's currently. And I hope it was enlightening. If it was, please like and subscribe. If it wasn't, please like and subscribe. I'd love to get your feedback and comments in the comment section. And until next time, keep it positively atheist out there in YouTube land. Thanks.